Before the first stone ever rose above the desert, there was already a question hanging in the air, one that still echoes beneath the sands of Egypt. How did a civilization, armed with copper tools and human muscle, imagine structures meant to last forever? As dawn breaks over the Nile Valley, the horizon is quiet, almost fragile. Yet this calm landscape would soon be transformed into a stage for ambition on a scale the world had never seen. The Old Kingdom did not begin with pyramids. It began with an idea that kings were not merely rulers, but divine beings whose power must be made eternal in stone. What follows is the story of how belief, authority, and human ingenuity converged to reshape history itself. The land that nurtured this vision was both generous and unforgiving. Each year, the Nile flooded its banks, depositing fertile silt that fed crops and people alike. This rhythm created stability, and from stability emerged centralized power. By the time the Old Kingdom took form, Egypt was already a unified state, ruled by kings who claimed descent from the gods. Memphis stood as the political heart of the realm, while the desert beyond the green fields became a sacred space, silent, vast, and perfect for monuments meant to defy time. Royal tombs evolved from simple pits into mastabas, and with each generation they grew larger, more complex, more daring. The dead king was no longer hidden beneath the earth. He was elevated, visible, commanding the horizon even after death. That transformation reached a decisive turning point under King Djoser. Instead of a single low structure, his architects envisioned something unprecedented. A tomb that rose in stages, stacking mastabas one atop another until stone itself seemed to climb toward the sky. The step pyramid at Saqqara was not just a burial place. It was a declaration. For the first time, stone replaced mud brick on a monumental scale, signaling a shift not only in architecture but in mindset. The king's eternal life now demanded an eternal material. As the final casing stones were set, Egypt crossed an invisible threshold. There was no return to modest tombs after this. The skyline of the afterlife had been forever altered. Yet the story did not end with Djoser's innovation. His successors inherited both the vision and the challenge it posed. If one king could ascend symbolically through stone, what might the next achieve? The early 4th dynasty answered with bold experimentation. Kings pushed boundaries, learning through failure as much as success. Pyramids collapsed, angles were corrected, and techniques refined. These were not mistakes of ignorance, but steps in a rapid evolution driven by royal ambition and state power. Behind every adjustment lay armies of laborers, farmers during the flood season, organized, fed, and housed by a sophisticated bureaucracy. The pyramids were not built by slaves in chains, but by a society mobilized around a shared cosmic purpose. That purpose reached its purest expression on the Giza Plateau. As the sun rises there, 3 colossal silhouettes dominate the desert, aligned with uncanny precision. Khufu's pyramid, the largest of them all, stands as the climax of the Old Kingdom's architectural journey. Its scale defies intuition, its geometry approaches perfection. For those who first watched it rise, stone by stone, it must have seemed impossible. And yet it happened, through careful planning, relentless labor, and an unshakable belief that the king's soul would ascend to the stars. At the heart of this monument lies a simple truth. Power, when fused with faith, can bend reality itself. The pyramid was not merely a tomb, it was a cosmic machine, designed to transform a mortal ruler into an eternal being. But even monuments this vast could not halt the slow erosion of time. As generations passed, the resources required to build such structures strained the state. Later pyramids grew smaller, their stones less finely cut, their ambition tempered by reality. Still, the legacy of the great builders endured. The pyramids had accomplished their purpose, not only securing royal immortality in belief, but projecting an image of order and permanence that defined Egypt for centuries. They became anchors of memory, reminding future rulers of a golden age when kings commanded stone and eternity answered. As the desert wind moves across Giza today, it carries more than sand. It carries the echo of an age when humanity dared to build forever. The Old Kingdom's pyramids are not relics of a forgotten past, they are witnesses. And as we turn our gaze beyond them, deeper into the lives, beliefs, and eventual decline of this civilization, one truth remains unresolved: what truly endures longer? Stone shaped by human hands or the ideas that compelled those hands to build? As the shadow of the Great Pyramids lengthened across the plateau, the world they symbolized began to change in ways invisible to stone. The structures still stood flawless against the sky, but beneath their immensity, the balance that had sustained them was slowly shifting. Power that once flowed effortlessly from the divine king outward now faced pressures it could not fully contain. The question was no longer how Egypt built eternity, but how long that eternity could be maintained. Beyond the royal monuments, daily life in the Old Kingdom followed rhythms as ancient as the river itself. Villages clustered along the Nile, where craftsmen shaped copper tools, scribes recorded harvests, and priests maintained rituals believed to keep the universe in balance. The pharaoh remained the axis of this world, the guarantor of Ma'at, the sacred order that held chaos at bay. As long as the king fulfilled his cosmic role, the floods would return, crops would grow, and the gods would remain favorable. The pyramids, rising beyond the fields, served as constant reminders that this order was not abstract. It was built, measured, and reinforced in stone. Yet sustaining such grandeur demanded extraordinary coordination. Quarries deep in the desert fed limestone to the pyramid sites, while distant mines supplied copper and precious stones. Officials managed labor, food distribution, and transport with remarkable efficiency, leaving behind inscriptions that reveal a state both confident and complex. This was not a fragile society improvising survival, but a machine finely tuned to serve a single vision of kingship. Every block laid was an affirmation of unity between ruler, people, and gods. The true turning point came quietly, without collapse or conquest. As reigns passed and dynasties aged, the divine aura surrounding the pharaoh subtly diminished. Royal authority, once absolute, began to fragment among powerful nobles and regional governors. Tombs of officials grew larger, more elaborate, reflecting a shift in who could claim permanence beyond death. The afterlife, once dominated exclusively by kings, was opening, an ideological change as significant as any architectural one. Eternity was no longer reserved for a single figure at the center of the world. This transformation carried profound consequences. With resources divided and loyalty dispersed, the state could no longer command the same scale of labor or material. Pyramid construction continued, but the results told a quieter story: structures less massive, techniques simplified, ambitions restrained. The grandeur of Giza was not replicated, not because the knowledge was lost, but because the world that required such monuments no longer existed. The climax of the Pyramid Age had passed, not with destruction, but with a gradual redefinition of power itself. Still, the meaning of the pyramids did not fade. They became symbols of an idealized past, a benchmark against which all later kings measured themselves. Even as political realities shifted, the memory of the Old Kingdom endured as a time when harmony between heaven and earth seemed complete. The pyramids stood as proof that such balance had once been achieved, if only briefly. And so, the story of the era of the pyramids does not end in ruin, but in transformation. Stone may resist time, but civilizations evolve, carrying their beliefs forward in new forms. As Egypt moved beyond this age of absolute kings and monumental certainty, it left behind more than tombs. It left a question carved into the desert itself: whether greatness is defined by what a civilization builds at its peak, or by how its legacy continues to shape the world long after the builders are gone. Long after the last casing stone was set and the last royal procession vanished into the desert, the pyramids began a second life, one not defined by construction but by meaning. Future generations did not see them as relics of labor, but as symbols of a perfected age. Travelers approached them with reverence, priests folded them into ritual memory, and kings looked upon them with both admiration and unease. To rule Egypt after the Old Kingdom was to govern in the shadow of giants. The landscape itself absorbed their presence. Causeways eroded, temples fell silent, yet the pyramids remained fixed points in a changing world. As political centers shifted and new capitals rose, the monuments of Giza and Saqqara became anchors of continuity. They reminded Egypt of what centralized power, divine authority, and national unity could achieve when aligned without fracture. Even in times of instability, the pyramids stood untouched, as if protected by the very eternity they were built to secure. This endurance reshaped Egyptian belief. The afterlife was no longer imagined solely as a royal ascent to the stars, but as a journey increasingly accessible to nobles and eventually to common people. Texts once reserved for kings appeared in private tombs, echoing the same spells meant to guide a ruler beyond death. In this quiet shift, the pyramids served as both origin and reference, proof that immortality was not an abstract promise, but something once made real through stone, ritual, and belief. Yet there is an irony woven into their permanence. The pyramids were built to preserve the identity of individual kings, but over time, those names faded from public memory. What endured was not Khufu the man or Djoser the ruler, but the idea of the pyramid itself. Form outlived personality. Geometry outlasted lineage. The structures became collective symbols, stripped of their original owners and claimed by history itself. As centuries turned into millennia, foreign powers arrived, Greeks, Romans, and later travelers from distant worlds, each interpreting the pyramids through their own lens. Some saw wisdom lost to time, others imagined secrets too advanced to belong to the past. Myths grew where records had eroded, and speculation filled the silence left by vanished voices. But beneath every theory and legend, one truth remained unchanged. These monuments were the product of human hands, guided by human belief, operating at the absolute limits of their world. In the end, the era of the pyramids is not only a story about ancient Egypt. It is a reflection of a universal human impulse, the desire to defy impermanence. The Old Kingdom reached for eternity with stone and symmetry, convinced that order could be fixed forever. What it achieved was not endless control, but something subtler and perhaps more powerful. A legacy that continues to provoke awe, curiosity, and longing across time. And as the sun sets once more behind the western desert, casting long shadows across the pyramids, they ask the same silent question they have always posed. When a civilization gives everything to build forever, what part of it truly lasts? The monument itself or the meaning we continue to search for within it? What remains, then, is the space between certainty and mystery. Archaeology can measure angles, trace quarry routes, and reconstruct labor systems, but it cannot fully recover the inner world that made such efforts feel inevitable. To the builders of the Old Kingdom, the pyramids were not wonders, they were necessities. Without them, the universe itself risked unraveling. Order depended on ritual, ritual depended on kingship, and kingship demanded monuments that could not fail. This mindset shaped how Egyptians understood time. Life on Earth was brief, cyclical, and fragile, while the afterlife was vast and permanent. The pyramids stood at the boundary between these worlds, bridging the fleeting and the eternal. Every procession toward them was a reminder that death was not an ending, but a transformation carefully engineered in stone. In this way, the pyramids were less about dominating nature and more about negotiating with it, aligning human intention with cosmic rhythm. And yet, nature always responds in its own way. Sand advanced, winds scoured surfaces smooth, and earthquakes tested foundations. The pyramids endured not because they were untouched, but because they were resilient. Their survival mirrors the civilization that created them, adaptable, disciplined, and deeply aware of its place in a larger order. Even stripped of temples and inscriptions, the core idea remained intact. This is why the pyramids continue to resist final explanation. They exist at the intersection of engineering, religion, politics, and psychology. Remove any one of these elements and the story collapses. Together, they form something rare in human history. A moment when belief was powerful enough to reorganize an entire society around a single vision of eternity. As the Old Kingdom receded into memory, Egypt moved forward, reshaping its institutions, its gods, and its understanding of power. But it never truly left the pyramids behind. Every later temple, tomb, and ritual carried echoes of that first great experiment in permanence. The age of the pyramids became a reference point, a silent standard against which all future greatness would be judged. And so the journey does not conclude at the foot of these monuments. It continues into the evolving soul of Egypt itself, where belief adapts, authority transforms, and eternity is pursued in new forms. The pyramids stand still, but the story moves on, inviting us to follow it beyond stone, beyond silence, and deeper into the civilization that dared to build forever. Beyond the stillness of the pyramids lies the echo of a decision that reshaped Egypt forever. By proving that eternity could be constructed, the Old Kingdom set a precedent that could never be undone. Future rulers inherited not only monuments but expectations. To be king was no longer simply to govern the living, it was to justify one's place among the immortal dead. This invisible pressure would define every era that followed. As centuries passed, Egypt's spiritual focus subtly shifted. Temples dedicated to gods grew in importance, while royal tombs gradually lost their singular dominance. The divine king remained sacred, but he was no longer alone at the center of the cosmos. Priests, cults, and local traditions gained influence, redistributing power once concentrated entirely in the hands of the pharaoh. In this changing landscape, the pyramids stood as reminders of an age when belief was unified, when the path to eternity was singular and unmistakable. Yet their presence continued to shape imagination. Even when kings abandoned pyramid building in favor of hidden tombs carved deep into the cliffs, the symbolism endured. Mountains replaced geometry, secrecy replaced display, but the goal remained the same: transcendence beyond death. The pyramids had solved the question once. Later generations simply chose different answers. What makes the era of the pyramids endure is not only what was built, but what it revealed about human ambition. The Old Kingdom showed that societies can mobilize entire populations around an abstract promise: that life continues, that order matters, that memory can outlast flesh. Few civilizations have pursued this promise with such clarity or commitment. Fewer still have left behind proof so undeniable. Today we stand separated from that world by thousands of years, yet the connection remains strangely intimate. We look at the pyramids and instinctively search for meaning, just as their builders intended. They were designed to be seen, questioned, and remembered. In that sense they succeeded beyond measure. The pyramids did not simply preserve the past, they ensured that the Old Kingdom would forever speak to the future. And as the desert night settles once more around these monuments, their message remains unchanged. Civilizations rise, beliefs evolve, and power shifts hands, but the desire to leave something lasting is eternal. The pyramids are not the end of the story, they are the proof that the story was worth telling at all. Even now, when silence settles over the plateau and the modern world fades from view, the pyramids continue to perform their original function. They command attention. They slow the mind. They force perspective. Standing before them, it becomes impossible to ignore the scale of intention that brought them into existence. These were not spontaneous achievements nor accidents of wealth. They were the outcome of a civilization that believed order could be engineered, that chaos could be held at bay through precision, ritual, and collective will. In this sense, the Old Kingdom was conducting an experiment, one that asked whether permanence could be designed into society itself. For a time the answer seemed to be yes. Authority was centralized, belief was shared, and labor was organized toward a single cosmic goal. The pyramids rose as physical confirmations that the system worked. But like all experiments bound to human structures, it carried limits that only became visible in hindsight. When those limits were reached, Egypt did not collapse into oblivion. Instead, it adapted. Power fractured, then reformed. Beliefs expanded, becoming more personal, more distributed. The certainty that once defined the age of the pyramids softened, making room for flexibility and survival. What was lost in absolute unity was gained in resilience. And through every transformation, the pyramids remained, unchanged witnesses to a world that no longer existed, yet never truly disappeared. This is why they feel timeless. Not because they are untouched by history, but because they contain history within them. Every block carries the imprint of a hand, every passage reflects a belief, every alignment encodes a worldview. They are archives written in stone, legible not through language, but through scale and intention. To follow the story beyond them is to follow Egypt itself, into new kingdoms, new gods, new expressions of power and eternity. But none of what comes next can be fully understood without this moment, when humanity first attempted to fix its place in the universe forever. The Old Kingdom reached for the infinite and left behind a horizon that still defines us. The pyramids do not ask to be solved. They ask to be remembered. And as long as they stand against the sky, the conversation they began, between mortality and meaning, ambition and belief, will never truly end.